That image of Arthur Schopenhauer with a Buddhist statue, not just aesthetic. While 19th century Europeans were dismissing Eastern philosophy, this German pessimist discovered something modern neuroscience is only now confirming. Desire is the engine of suffering. Before we dive in, I should clarify something critical. Schopenhauer didn't steal from Buddhism. He independently reached similar conclusions before encountering Eastern texts. That's what makes this story so damn fascinating. Schopenhauer opened the world as will and representation with an account from Java that haunts me, a field of turtle skeletons. These creatures came ashore to lay eggs, only to be flipped on their backs by wild dogs, torn open and eaten alive. A tiger then often killed the dogs. Schopenhauer asked, "For what offense must they suffer this agony? What is the point of this scene of horror?" This perfectly captures Schopenhauer's worldview. Existence itself contains inescapable suffering. Not a popular position in Enlightenment-era Germany, where people were celebrating reason and progress. What Schopenhauer called, this blind, irrational force driving all creatures, maps perfectly to what Buddhism identifies as the cause of suffering. This will create endless desires that can never be fully satisfied. Sound familiar? It's essentially the Buddha's second noble truth. We now know Schopenhauer wrote his magnum opus between 1814 to 1818, before deeply engaging with Buddhist texts. Only later did he discover the parallels, writing to a friend. The agreement with my own teachings is especially wonderful, since I wrote the first volume from 1814 to 1818, and did not know anything about all that. While philosophers like Kant and Hegel acknowledged Eastern thought, they viewed it as primitive compared to Western ideas. Schopenhauer did the opposite, eventually declaring Buddhism the best of all possible religions and keeping the Upanishads by bedside. Now, there's a persistent misreading of Schopenhauer as just some bitter misanthrope projecting his personal unhappiness onto philosophy. Yes, his life was rough. Father likely committed suicide when Arthur was 17, mother actively despised him, academic career flopped, and his masterwork was initially ignored. But Nietzsche, before rejecting Schopenhauer's pessimism, argued his isolation didn't distort his vision. It clarified it. Free from society's comforting illusions, Schopenhauer saw truths others avoided. His position isn't just philosophical navel-gazing. Schopenhauer challenged optimists to visit hospitals, military wards, surgical theaters, prisons, torture chambers, and battlefields, and then defend their rosy worldview. This isn't nihilism. It's an unflinching acknowledgement of reality as the first step toward addressing it. Both Schopenhauer and Buddhism conclude that suffering comes from desire, and liberation requires transcending desire. Schopenhauer describes the state in terms strikingly similar to nirvana. Then nothing can trouble a man more, nothing can move him, for he has cut all the 1,000 cords which hold us bound to the world. Schopenhauer's ethics of universal compassion directly parallels the Buddhist concept of karuna, his view that individual identity is illusory. What he calls a principium individuationis, mirrors the Buddhist doctrine of anatman or no-self. Through Schopenhauer, Buddhist concept infiltrated Western intellectual tradition. His influence extends to Nietzsche's critique of Western values, Freud's theory of unconscious drives, and Wagner's themes of renunciation. The Schopenhauer-Buddhism connection matters beyond academic interest. It suggests that when humans honestly confront fundamental questions about suffering, desire, and reality, regardless of time or culture, they sometimes reach similar conclusions. Both recognize that what we typically consider reality is largely illusion, that desire breeds suffering, and that transcending desire brings liberation. Both rejected the idea that technological advancement or external change could eliminate suffering's root cause. In our age of mindfulness apps and corporate meditation retreats, it's easy to forget that these ideas entered Western consciousness partially through a cantankerous German who died in 1860, before the Beatles visited India. Before the first Zen centers opened in America, Schopenhauer was already building philosophical bridges. So was Schopenhauer a Buddhist? Not in practice, but in his philosophical DNA, absolutely. He served as Buddhism's first serious Western ambassador, not by appropriating Eastern ideas, but by independently arriving at similar insights. If this exploration of philosophical convergence interested you, hit subscribe for more deep dives that challenge conventional wisdom. Comment your thoughts on whether profound insights transcend cultural boundaries or are culturally specific. And if you want more on surprising East-West philosophical connections, smash that like button. Until next time, question everything, especially the boundaries between philosophical traditions.